Thanks very much, President. I'm almost tempted just to say what you said yesterday and what they've all said the day, but I know that if I do that, David Belsey will have my guts for garters, so I'm going to deliver the speech that I have prepared for you. And like Paula, I wanted to say thanks very much for that strong display of solidarity with EIS FILA members out on strike for the 15th day today. It's still having to strike for a fair pay increase that they should have got coming up on 2 years ago. Absolutely disgraceful. You'll remember from the strike action during our Pay Attention campaign last year how important it was to receive solidarity from other sections of the union and indeed from across the wider trade union movement. Solidarity is gold for the soul. So thank you very much for all that you've done this morning, all that you've done in the weeks previous to today in displaying that solidarity to FILA. But please keep sending it because don't worry about overdoing it. You can never overdo it because solidarity is the superpower that trade unions and trade unionists rely on to get us through the darkest of days and out the other side with the wins on pay and conditions that shine on and that sustain us for years and for decades to come. Sustain the workers who win them and shine on for all trade union members. We encourage each other with our wins, we raise the expectations of our colleagues, and we raise the standards that that employers have to meet. A victory for one, as we've heard several times throughout this conference already, is a victory for all, and solidarity is absolutely the glue that binds us. 2 weeks ago, our executive committee showed unequivocally the strength of the EIS's commitment to trade union solidarity, to supporting our members across this union, specifically members in EIS FILA at this time, and our collective commitment to helping them win this latest dispute with their employers. To help cushion the financial hardship and the emotional pressure that comes from having to take 15 days of strike action up till this point, losing 15 days' pay during the worst cost of living crisis in living memory. To help raise their morale as college employers act like feudal lords with the power to starve their workers back to work by threatening 100% deeming of lecturers' wages for weeks, even months on end. Lecturers who are carrying out legitimate action short of strike. And so far, these employers seem to be getting away with applying some of the worst provisions of the anti-trade union laws that there are. The Minister for FE practically green-lighting deeming in the Scottish Parliament last week. Disgraceful. When you've got that going on, and you need to call a local dispute at the same time as the national dispute is ongoing, so that you can stand up for yourself, you need a little help from your friends. A lot of help from your friends, in fact. And the good thing about being a union member is you've got thousands and thousands of friends who've absolutely got your back. Which is why the Executive Committee last week agreed to open up a £5 million hardship fund to sustain striking FILA members right up until the end of this academic session. A massive financial commitment. A massive financial commitment that shows our FILA members that our union knows the power of solidarity, knows how to show it, and knows the value of further education to our society. That our union knows the value of lecturers as professionals in providing that education and understands the egregious injustice of the defund and privatise strategy that's in play at the moment. Government and management in cahoots, and lecturers, support staff, and particularly working class students, the collateral damage. The EIS knows all too well that despite the blethering rhetoric of fair work, the Scottish Government and college employers would like to see EIS FILA, and by dint of that, the EIS disappear from the sector, leaving the path clear for rule by the principles and the privatisation agenda where colleges serve businesses and not people and communities, not working class students and their communities. Union busting instincts seem to be driving the decision-making in college boards the length and breadth of the country and in Holyrood backrooms. But no matter what the employers do or the politicians don't do, see what I did there? The EIS is a union that fights hard for all of our members, and we're here to stay in the college sector. We are going nowhere. That £5 million fund that we opened last week is a fighting fund as much as it is a hardship fund. And that money and solidarity from across the union will help sustain the strength and resolve of EIS FILA members until this dispute is settled and an acceptable resolution is won, and it will be. Because hard though it is to do it, industrial action delivers better outcomes for workers. You wouldn't have won your last pay rise without it, without taking that essential industrial action. STUC data published in April shows that striking trade union members in Scotland collectively won an additional $3 billion in pay and pensions uplifts on top of the original offers that were made to them by employers. That was before they took that industrial action. That's the strength of our collective superpower. So we don't buy the rhetoric that striking is in no one's interests, because industrial action clearly is in the interest of workers, including teachers and lecturers. And that's what employers and centre-to-right governments are afraid of. And we're in no doubt that it will be the continuing industrial action by EIS FILA members that will deliver the fair pay and the protection of jobs and courses that they're fighting so hard for at the moment. And once we've won this dispute, EIS FILA, with the EIS by its side, will continue the even bigger fight for the future of further education in Scotland. Because as educators and as trade unionists who have social justice to our core, we know what's right for young people, for our communities, and for our whole society, and we are prepared to stand up together for it. We've shown that non-stop determination to stand up for what's right over the past year. That non-stop determination has come from you, in your local associations, in your school branches, from your reps and activists, from the national office bearers, and from each and every member of EIS staff. We've supported each other, and we've stood united and strong as we've campaigned for quality education, for the future of further education, for better funding for higher education, to protect the right to strike, and stood united and strong for peace and for social justice across a whole raft of issues. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank every single one of you and your fellow activists for all of that. And to thank Paula and Alan and Andrea for their unstinting commitment and dedication to this union and its members. And to thank all EIS staff for their tireless efforts each and every day, alongside our committee conveners and committee members, our council members and local associations in driving forward our collective ambitions. This union is absolutely solid. In the past 12 months together, we've been standing up for proper prevention of and protection from violence and aggression in our schools. Nearly 900 school branches completing the behaviour survey. The results and recommendations shared with the Scottish Government, COSLA and all MSPs, as well as all relevant education stakeholders. We've done media interview after media interview, shining a light on the damning results from the National Behaviour Survey, whilst local associations, Aberdeen City and Borders most notably, laid bare the stark reality of the abuse that many teachers face on a daily basis. We've been standing up for proper prevention and protection from violence and aggression at the Cabinet Secretary's series of behaviour summits, pushing hard to influence the final behaviour action plan that's going to arise from those through our involvement in Sagrabus, and being crystal clear that the EIS logo of endorsement will not be forthcoming if the plan fails to identify any additional resourcing to solve the problem of violence and aggression in our schools. No resources attached to the action plan, no EIS logo attached to the action plan. It's as simple as that. So colleagues, a straightforward message from this AGM to the Scottish Government. Wishful thinking and a glossy, shiny action plan will not lead to better behaviour-related health and safety in our classrooms. Additional government money to recruit more staff will. If you want safer, more settled classroom environments where all children and young people can learn, it comes at a cost. And that cost can no longer be teachers' health, safety and well-being. We will keep standing up to be counted on that front. Not unrelated, we've been standing up since the last AGM for proper additional support needs provision. At meetings, in the media, and earlier this week we released a joint statement along with other teacher and support staff unions and key parents groups, demanding more investment in ASN for the almost 40% of children and young people who now have a recognised additional support need. And that's against a backdrop, as we were hearing yesterday, of a 33% spending cut per capita. One ASN teacher now to 89 pupils. 10 years ago, it was one ASN teacher to 40 pupils, still not enough, but the problem has more than doubled in that 10-year period. And just as I said we would at last year's AGM, we've been busy building alliances with Unite, with Unison, GMB, who represent the support staff, and with parents groups, national parents groups, the NPFS and Connect, and more local parents groups, but high-profile ones nonetheless, the Glasgow City Parents Group. All were signatories to the joint statement this week, along with our sister teacher trade unions, and all know as we do that creating national additional support needs legislation, then cutting local authority budgets, then commissioning reviews when things inevitably go wrong, reviews that deliberately miss out proper investigation of resourcing, does not demonstrate real political conviction in respect of inclusion. As my comment in the joint press release said, the underfunding and under-resourcing of ASN provision is a national scandal, which must be addressed as a matter of urgency. The Scottish Government and Scotland's local authorities can't sweep this issue under the carpet any longer. They must invest much more in ASN provision to ensure that we can mitigate the impact of poverty on children's education and truly get it right for every child. So this week, and every week between the last AGM and this one, we've been standing up for proper ASN provision as a union, and we've been standing up for you as teachers as well. You as teachers whose workload continues to be totally unacceptable, as the workload research published yesterday has highlighted. 11 hours of unpaid work a week from the average teacher. That's even worse than it was at the last count. We've raised that issue at SNCT meeting after SNCT meeting, at bilateral after bilateral, stressing the importance of the promise that was made to the electorate. The promise that was made to the electorate in 2021 to reduce teacher class contact time to 21 hours a week. A promise to the electorate, including tens of thousands of teachers, hundreds of thousands of parents and carers, and hundreds of thousands of others who are interested in quality education provision in Scotland. And we've been stressing the importance of the full delivery of that manifesto promise in the interests of quality education, and the imperative of the time being given to teachers for preparation and marking. Because if it's not, the workload crisis worsens and teacher well-being deteriorates even further, and we are absolutely not standing for that. So another message to the Scottish Government from this AGM. The additional 90 minutes must be delivered as promised, and it must go to teachers for preparation and marking. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. That's an absolute red line. And linked to workloads, we've been standing up for teacher numbers, because despite the other big Scottish Government manifesto promise to recruit 3,500 more teachers by 2026, in December we saw teacher numbers fall for a second year in a row. And as yesterday's emergency motion highlighted, Glasgow City Council has already moved to implement a massive cut of 450 teachers over the next 3 years. The Scottish Government says that it values education and wants to close the poverty-related achievement and attainment gap, yet shortchanges councils in their funding year upon year, and then freezes council tax, and then councils themselves shamefully start squeezing the lives out of schools. Meanwhile, it's you, the young people and their families, who suffer as local and national government play politics with their public service delivery. And as others have said, we're even starting to hear echoes of a new and very pernicious narrative coming from politicians whose party manifesto states a clear commitment to increase teacher numbers, that protecting teacher numbers, protecting education, is a luxury that some councils in Scotland, including its biggest, can no longer afford. It's appeared on social media, in some newspapers, and I've even heard it implied in the Scottish Parliament just in the last few weeks. None of this is acceptable. Not acceptable to parents and carers who have a right to expect that their money, their taxes, will be spent wisely, including on their children's education. And not acceptable to our members who've worked tirelessly, beyond capacity and to their own detriment, for the benefit of children and young people as we've emerged from the pandemic, and have done so holding on to a promise made to them in 2021 that things were going to get better. Not acceptable to the EIS. But if the Scottish Government intends to renege on that manifesto promise on teacher numbers, talking as they are now about only maintaining teacher numbers, then they need to come clean to the whole electorate about it. Come clean that they're not going to recruit 3,500 more teachers to boost the staffing of a service that's already on its knees. Come clean to the teachers who are massively subsidising the education system right now with free work because there aren't enough teachers, to do all that's required. Come clean that they've no intention of ending the precarity of employment that's blighting the personal and professional lives of thousands of teachers in Scotland at the moment. And come clean and then pay the price at the next Scottish Parliament election and maybe even the general election before that. But some honesty on that front would be good. I had another email just this week from a member on the issue of precarity. And he said, I'm currently looking for work next year. I'm writing to express my distress at the prospect of having no secure employment from August and joining an ever-growing number of practitioners on the supply list. To speak personally, I'm a solo parent of 2 young children. Frankly, it feels irresponsible of me to rely on the possibility of finding full-time supply work anytime soon. I've begun to look for full-time employment in other sectors. I've worked so hard for this and really enjoyed having my class this year. I feel I'm a reflective practitioner and I was excited about the prospect of continuing my career and becoming a better teacher. I know so many other probationers currently experiencing this same stress. And colleagues, emails like this are not isolated occurrences. Last summer, I received a deluge of emails like that from young teachers in a similar position. Some of them were very, very harrowing to read. Not only were they stressed and anxious, and I was seriously concerned about their mental health, stressed and anxious about the uncertainty around their next steps professionally, they couldn't make key life decisions to rent or to buy a house, rent or to buy somewhere to live, to get married, to start a family, to even go a wee holiday. Their lives artificially and unfairly being kept on hold. So I wrote to the previous First Minister to raise that issue at the time, and was, fairly frank about the kind of representations that I was receiving from members. The response, a scheduled meeting with the Cabinet Secretary was brought forward, but little more. Teacher numbers fell again in December. Then came some tightening of grant conditions, maybe some fines for councils who were already cash-strapped for not maintaining teacher numbers. But then in the last week, the Scottish Government providing a workaround for councils as to how the cuts can be made without too much of a penalty being applied to them. Colleagues, it's Kafkaesque what we're seeing at the moment. But it's not only the 2021 manifesto commitment that's on the line here. Failing to recruit more teachers will breach the promises made back in 2018 when we signed the Value Education, Value Teachers pay deal. The promises to reduce teacher workload and improve teacher well-being way back then. That deal was struck with John Swinney, then Cabinet Secretary for Education, and 6 years on, we're in a worse and worsening position. I wrote to John Swinney on the first day that he was sworn in as First Minister, signalling that while he might have been on the backbenches for the past year, we've stayed on the front line of campaigning for quality education that's rooted in social justice, and that we're keen to see how he'll demonstrate that continued commitment to education. And while we wait for the reply to that letter, another message for the Scottish Government. Warm words are cheap. Teachers and quality education are not. We simply cannot run a quality education service on empty promises and the goodwill of teachers that's already been well overspent. We can't keep expecting teachers to give more and more at personal cost to them and their families. We can't keep allowing the thousands and thousands of hours of unpaid work to clock up. Those thousands and thousands of hours equate to permanent jobs that thousands of teachers, our members like the one who wrote to me this week, can't get. So this AGM is calling time on unpaid labour in the teaching profession. Teachers must be paid for all the work that they do, and they must be paid properly for it. So turning to our pay claim, on that note, turning to our pay claim, teachers' pay must be restored to the value that it held in 2008. That's why we submitted the 6.5% pay claim, a moderate, modest pay claim that was going to be a step in the direction of restoration. And it was less than the percentage uplift that MSPs have been awarded for this year. And that's why our Salaries Committee unanimously rejected the pay offer that finally came from COSLA on Tuesday of this week after almost 5 months of waiting. 2% from August till May, then 1% from May till August 2025. That was the terms of the offer. It's undifferentiated, which is good, but more than misses the mark in terms of its value. It amounts to an increase of £54 a month only by the time you get to May of 2025. So you've got to wait months before you get that £54 in its entirety uplift. But that amount fails to take into account the continuing pressures of the cost of living. Bills are not going down, they're just rising by a bit less than before. And we know that more and more of our members are experiencing hardship. We only had to listen to Susan Slater's report on employment relations yesterday to be reminded of the number and nature of the applications to the Benevolent Fund and what that tells us about the dire straits that so many of our members are in. So that pay offer that came in this week simply does not cut it. So we unapologetically echo our demand for a pay increase that begins to recover some of the losses that teachers have suffered over the past decade. Since the onset of austerity and the suppression of public sector pay, teachers' salaries have significantly declined in their real terms value, falling further and further behind the salary levels in many other education systems across the OECD. As a result of the strike action that EIS members led in 22-23, teachers at the top of the main grade scale now earn £48,516. But despite the gains prompted by our strike action, the amount now earned is almost 25% less than it would have been if salaries had been annually paid at the rate of RPI inflation since 2008. Had teachers' salaries been paid properly in accordance with retail price rises, teachers at the top of the main grade would now be earning £61,234, a much more attractive salary that more accurately reflects the value of teachers and that would help strengthen recruitment and retention and move Scotland closer, not above, closer to the 23 to 25 countries in the OECD that pay higher salaries to experienced teachers, including Spain and Germany, Canada and Australia, and very close to home, England and Ireland. If these countries can do it, Scotland can do it as well. We don't accept that pay restoration for teachers is not affordable, especially not when teachers are owed millions for the unpaid work that they've been doing for years and continue to do today. We accept that full restoration can't happen overnight, but we don't accept that the Scottish Government mantra about a fixed budget. Scotland does have a fixed budget. Scotland does not have a fixed budget. The government chooses to have one. And the underfunding of education as a vital public service is not inevitable. It's a conscious political choice. And Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, agrees. The report of the Global UN Inquiry into the teaching profession that the EIS gave evidence to was published a couple of months back, and I'm going to just read you just a little section from it. It said, "Quality education is not possible without adequate financing. Long-term funding for well-qualified and well-supported teachers is an investment in the quality and sustainability of education systems and is more efficient than short-term measures to fill teacher gaps, which result in high turnover and attrition." It continued, "Governments should invest in teachers through competitive salaries and incentives, as well as through the provision of qualified education support personnel. Secure employment and decent working conditions for teachers," the UN report said, "are foundational for recruitment and retention in the profession. Working conditions should also provide for stable contractual forms, a safe and healthy workplace, manageable teacher-to-student ratios," it doesn't say class sizes, but we would, "support structures for managing problematic student behaviour, balanced workloads, adequate social protection and pensions, and working time arrangements, including duties beyond classroom teaching, such as lesson preparation, marking, and out-of-class student and parent engagements that allow for adequate rest and work-life balance." That is the United Nations, colleagues, that is saying that, the United Nations, not only the EIS. So clearly, the United Nations, having done that global consultation on the state of the teaching profession, has concluded that it has to stand up for quality education. And the EIS, of course, is standing up for quality education. My question is, why isn't the Scottish Government, when manifesto after manifesto promised that it would, why isn't the Scottish Government standing up enough for quality education? There may be a fixed budget from Westminster, but the Scottish Government not only makes political decisions about how to spend the money, and buckets of it go elsewhere other than on public services, they make the political decisions around whether to use the revenue-raising powers that are devolved to the Scottish Parliament. And for their own political reasons, they've largely chosen not to do that. So the consequences of their funding decisions are on them. Our last pay settlement, hard fought with days of strike action and loss of salary, is not to blame for the underfunding of further education, or the bad weather that we've been having in the early part of the summer, or indeed the fall of the Roman Empire, or the plethora of other faults, shortcomings and calamities that have been attributed to the implementation of our pay settlement. No, a £56 billion budget plus revenue-raising powers that include the ability to place greater taxes on wealth should mean that giving teachers a modest pay rise should be more than possible if the political will were there to do it. No matter what employers and the Scottish Government decide to do this time around when it comes to teacher pay, though, our collective trade union conscience will be clear. We do the right thing, always. On pay and on everything else. We believe in proper funding of public services and decent pay for public sector workers, including teachers and lecturers. We stand for education as a social good, a cornerstone of a society that's built on principles of social justice. We stand up for quality education from age 3 to 18, from our youngest learners in early years to our 6-year students in secondary. And we stand up for the right of all of these young people to be taught by a GTCS registered teacher who are in the classroom with them and not on a screen. And we stand up for smaller classes in the knowledge that teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions. We stand against the dithering and delay we've seen over the last year on education reform that means too much time is still being spent in classrooms doing things that contribute little or nothing to the quality of learning and teaching. Too much time on over-assessment and having to dance to the tune of top-down accountability. The roadmap to an improved senior phase experience is there. The route out of the treadmill of high-stakes exams that crushes the joy out of learning and teaching, that's bad for health and well-being, and that sidelines the young people whose courses don't feature exams. We continue to stand up for better. Finally, 2 days ago, after repeated prompts on our part, we saw the first sign of movement from the Scottish Government in progressing some elements of education reform. Colleagues, we'll be looking really closely at the terms of the education bill, but we're clear, as we have been from the beginning, that the reform it brings forward has to be meaningful, particularly in relation to the SQA. Qualifications Scotland must be a brand new organisation, not a 60-minute makeover or a fast rebranding. We stand against the top-down accountability measures that see teachers' workload rocket and their health and well-being nosedive. HMI inspections, meaningless tests like SNSAs, which tell us nothing we don't already know. We stand for trust in teacher professional judgment and for the human-centred approach to change, which was so boldly promoted in our national discussion and it's been echoed in lots of the contributions to the debate this morning. We stand against the poverty that's inflicted on our young people and their families as a result of political choices that are from the same playbook as the underfunding of public services. We demand free school meals for all early years and school-aged children and young people. There is absolutely no valid excuse that can justify allowing children to be hungry or stigmatised in school. Absolutely no valid excuse, and to continue to try to make those excuses about this is unforgivable. We continue to stand up for equality across our education settings and against discrimination of any kind. Racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, we stand up against all of that. We stand up for the right to strike, committed to fighting the Tories' anti-strike laws industrially, legally and politically, up to and including non-compliance for as long as this draconian legislation is in force. We stand up for an immediate ceasefire, a peaceful resolution to the conflict in the Middle East, and against the sale of UK arms to Israel. No equivocating. That, colleagues, and much more are reflected in the Stand Up for Quality Education manifesto that we are officially launching today ahead of the 4th of July general election. We've been quick off the mark in publishing this after the election was called just 2 weeks and 2 days ago. So you have this lovely, glossy, well-constructed publication that really captures what the EIS is standing up for, through all aspects of our work at the moment. Now, it's a UK general election, and of course education is devolved to the Scottish Parliament, but the EIS believes that Scottish MPs in Westminster have a responsibility to act in the interests of Scotland and its citizens in respect of all public services, including education. Whether matters are devolved or not, values matter, and the Barnett consequentials, of course, matter as well. In many ways, it was easy to turn this manifesto around so quickly because we know what we stand for. Our union democracy is strong. Our decisions are soundly rooted in strong principles and values, and they don't change depending on what way the wind's blowing. We know that underinvestment in education in the here and now is a massive error of political judgment. Politicians need to see, as we do, that the cost of a few million savings in the short term will be massive in the lives of the young people whose futures hang by a thread, the young people for whom school and their teachers are a safety net. The human cost of underinvesting in education should be unconscionable to the people who say that they're in politics because they want to work for a better society. Too often, though, our politicians appear to know the price of everything and the value of nothing. So we need to go on trying to convince them to invest properly in education today because it's the right and socially just thing to do, and because significant and sustained investment in education now will deliver huge long-term savings on health, on employability, and on criminal justice for decades to come. It should be an absolute no-brainer. So today, in launching this manifesto, we urge all political parties and general election candidates to stand up for quality education, to stand up for workers' rights, to stand up for peace, for equality and for climate justice alongside the EIS. Let us see what you're really made of. And we encourage all voters, teachers, support staff, the parents and carers and families of our young people, and all who care about quality education to cast their votes with the EIS vision of quality education firmly in their sights. Today, in launching this manifesto, colleagues, we encourage all to stand up with us, stand up for us, and stand up for quality education. Solidarity.